What if you could lead more effectively and go home on time? Welcome to the Lightbulb. I'm Zoe Thompson, leadership and performance coach, and each week I bring you 3 practical insights from my work helping impact-driven leaders transform from reactive to intentional leadership so they can finish work on time and take guilt-free time off, creating success that feels as good as it looks. Let's jump in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are tuning into this. I wasn't even sure what time of the day it was for myself. This is episode 40. Thank you for tuning in. If you are new here, I'm Zoe. I'm a leadership and performance coach. Every week, I choose 3 light bulbs from the work that I do with one-to-one clients and in organizations. And when I say a light bulb, it's something that is a learning point, something that I think I can share with you that will help you in your leadership. And it's a great free resource, 15 to 20 minutes every week, 3 light bulbs, 3 ways that you can take action to be a better leader with better balance. So I have 3 light bulbs from my work this week, one-to-one sessions, group calls, looking at being more efficient. We're looking at being more effective. We're looking at how we can create more confident, resilient, self-sufficient teams. I want you to be a better leader and have better balance. That's what we're working for here. And that means moving away from reactive leadership into more intentional leadership. With that being said, should we get into the light bulbs for this week? Light bulb 1, I think this is going to resonate with a lot of you, especially over this summer period, because you've got half of your teams that are on annual leave, you've got half of the teams trying to cover. You will no doubt be encouraging people to make sure they fully step away because that's really important. It puts additional pressure on you as a leader as well. And this came up with a client this week. What's the best way to describe this? It sounded like this was somebody who was drowning and still trying to rescue everybody else. Lots going on and understandably overwhelmed. This is very legitimate overwhelm in terms of what they are being required to do. They don't have a huge amount of support. They don't have a particularly strong team. And so it does mean that there is a lot coming through them as a leader, and that's making it tough. And so, as I said, a very legitimate overwhelm, feeling like they're drowning, trying to swim their way out of it, through it. And it's tough because you're trying to hold everyone else up while you're the one going under. It's tough when you've still got, you're barely keeping your head above water and people are still looking at you to rescue them. That makes it really, really tough. One of the things that we talked about was getting really clear on what has to be done, because when we're in that state of overwhelm, everything feels very urgent. Everybody else's stuff feels very urgent, and it can become really difficult in really trying to get clear on what has to be done. What is it that you really must do by the end of the day, by the end of the week, within the next 7 days, and being very clear with your team over what needs to be done as well. It can be very easy to want to work extra long hours. It can be very easy to log on at the weekend to try and catch up. It's not sustainable. And that isn't what's going to stop you from drowning. And as tough as it is, we have to get upstream and we have to put things in place that either make the waters more shallow or help your team to be stronger swimmers. And sometimes we need something that is in place that does both. Us trying to hold everybody else up is not sustainable. And it's also not a strategic way of leading. We need to be looking further ahead. We need to be looking wider to see what needs to be done to prevent this from happening over and over again. Because this is the challenge. If we don't fix what's at the root cause, then we do keep having the same problems. And so this was a lot of the conversation with this client was understanding, okay, what is really important? What absolutely has to be done in terms of business delivery to keep things going? What's the first opportunity you have to step away from the day-to-day business delivery to work on the business? And what do you need to put in place that's going to help, as I said, make the water more shallow or make your team stronger swimmers? Because that is what's going to help make things easier over that shorter period of time. It's so easy to want to keep showing up and trying to keep everything going, but we have limited energy for that. And let's add into the mix the fact that it's school holidays and a lot of you are juggling commitments at home as much as you are additional pressure in work. That means the longer hours and the weekend working might not even be an option. So understand what's really clear and then understand what you need to do to make things easier rather than repeat of trying to fix and rescue. What do you need to put in place? And that will mean that you'll need to step away from business as usual for a day or 2 days to be able to do that. And they will have to cope without you. The business will have to continue without you there while you go in and work on that stuff. That needs to be the priority. Stepping away so that you can get upstream and you can come up with a plan and you can work through it is what's going to help make things easier in the long term. And not just for you, for your team as well. Okay, Lightbulb 2. Now, I did a workshop this week for a Ministry of Justice. So this is public sector, a very demanding role, lots of uncertainty, lots of change. It's pretty much one of those jobs where they can make a plan at 8 o'clock in the morning and by lunchtime, they're already on plan C or plan D. And the workshop that they asked for was on time management and prioritisation. Within that, we talked about what the priorities are for them, then also the boundaries around that, because we can have protected time. We can block out our calendar for something that we know is important. But unless we have the boundaries to protect that time, things aren't going to change. We'll just end up moving it around. We just end up having these recurring blocks of time that we don't take any notice of. And if we don't take any notice on, we're very flexible when people ask us how firm that is, then people will recognize that that's not actually really protected time. It's just what we put in the calendar. So we do need to make sure that that is protected. So boundaries are important. What is also important is that we have to be very clear about what we're using that time for. We have to check in with what our priorities are. We need to check in on what is coming up in the next week or two. That means we are then working in the top right-hand corner of the Eisenhower matrix. So for those of you who are familiar with it, you'll know that we ideally want to be working on things that are important before they become urgent. And that means blocking out time, deciding what needs to be done in advance, leaving ourselves some scope for contingency, making sure that we underestimate how much time we have and overestimate how much time we need. We need to make sure that we have those time blocks protected, and we need to make sure that we know exactly what we are planning to do in that time. And then we can show up with intention, with purpose, to make sure the tasks or the group of tasks in that activity are done. We need to make sure before we even get close to that protected time blocks, we know exactly what it's going to be used for. So boundaries are important. Being very clear on what that time is being used for is also important. And actually, if we put that in and that is in the calendar, that helps the conversations so that we know that if we're saying yes to something else, we know exactly what it is that we are saying no to. And if we're saying no to that time block, we then need to be able to see a clear option for where we can reschedule that in to make sure that that work is still done in the time frame that we need it to be done in, so that it's not getting pushed right through to getting very close to the deadline. Ultimately, when you're clear on what the time is for, it makes it so much easier for you to put a boundary in place to protect that. The clarity is what's going to help you both allocate the time and protect it as well. Okay. The third and final light bulb for this week. This came up with somebody who's doing the Elevate Your Efficiency program at the moment. And one of the modules talks about decision making. And within the decision-making frameworks that the program teaches, we talk about the importance of aligning the decisions that we make with our personal values and our organizational values. Now, this often brings up the conversation around getting clear on what personal values are. Most people have a good idea of what their company values are because it gets talked about quite a lot, but we don't always spend a lot of time looking at our personal values. It's always something that I've said I wish we did in school. Now, I wish we could really help young people get very clear on what their values are, because when you're very clear on your values, it makes decision making much easier, but it also helps you to understand you and also for you to understand other people as well. So values are really important. When I'm talking about values, I'm talking about your principles, your standards of behavior, how you choose to live, the rules, unwritten rules that you choose to live by, and what you determine is important. And as a leader, you need a good understanding of what your team's values are, because your team will probably have some shared values. And quite often we can see what those are, because a lot of people will be attracted to work in a particular industry or with a particular company because of the organizational values. So quite often we will have shared values. And actually, it's something that we talked about in the workshop with Ministry of Justice, of that it's quite common in the public sector that people are motivated by wanting to make a difference. So quite often the shared values, the very common values for people who work in the public sector is making a difference, positivity, community, impact, all of the things that are really important, especially for doing the work that they do. You will always have your own individual values, and your team will have their individual values as well. Some people are really clear on what theirs are, some people less so. And this is what we were talking about in the one-to-one session. What are my values? And when we talked about what those values were, it wasn't clear to them. And I asked a number of different questions and we explored what they might be. They'd said that they'd looked at this before, they'd explored values before and never really got clear on it. You know, they kind of got it, but they didn't get it. They didn't have that clarity. So I wanted to approach it with them in a different way. So what we did was we talked about something that had happened in their workplace more recently that had really frustrated them, something that had really pushed their buttons. We then talked about what it was that pushed their buttons, that might not have pushed other people's buttons, but it most definitely pushed theirs. And that's where we were able to elicit what their personal values were. And actually, they were really clear on what their values were. They were really clear in understanding what had shaped how they'd responded to it, what had shaped the decisions they'd made as a result of what had happened, and how they chose to move through it. When we started taking the word values out of the equation and we started talking about principles or standards, it became much more clear for them. This is sometimes the difference between those who lean in more to a logical brain, those who lean more into an emotional brain. Sometimes it's the language that means things just don't land for other people in the way that they land for us. And again, as leaders, we need to be really aware of that. We need to understand what other people's values and principles are. We also need to remember that actually, because people have different values and principles, they are going to experience different things in different ways. What might push their button might not push ours, and vice versa. So we need to be able to understand that, because that's what's going to help us to have conversations with them when we notice that perhaps something hasn't landed with them as it might have landed with the rest of the team, or maybe they feel quite strongly about something, but the rest of the team don't seem that bothered by it. That will often come down to values, comes down to principles, and it comes down to standards. The more we understand ourselves, the more that helps us to understand how people tick And the more we ask questions and we're curious about what other people's values are and their principles and standards, the more we can connect and have much more meaningful connections with those that we work with, whether that's peers or our team. So those are my 3 light bulbs this week. Drowning while you're still trying to rescue, protecting your time without being clear as to what goes in it, and then understanding what impacts decisions for you. Ultimately, as with so many of the conversations that I have, it is understanding you and how you work and how you work best. It's actually what helps you to be a better leader for other people too. Taking a little bit of time to understand why you want to rescue, why you want to do things in a certain way, why you find it easier to say yes to other people rather than to yourself, why certain things irritate, frustrate, and make you feel very strongly about things, even though nobody else seems to be bothered. All of those are about understanding yourself better. And the more we understand ourselves, the more we start to understand what it means for us. And so therefore what it might mean for other people too. And that for me is really what makes us great leaders. It's the curiosity of the people that we work with. We don't make assumptions. We don't make judgments. We are curious and we ask lots of questions and we listen. And that for me is the golden thread of the great leaders. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. If you feel comfortable sharing, do reach out and let me know. There are actions that you can take away. Now you know what you know. What will you do differently? Keep it small, keep it simple, keep it specific. Think about where you can implement the changes that you want to make, because that's what's going to shift you from the reactive leader to the intentional leader. And that's what this podcast is all about. I will see you next week for the next episode. Have a fantastic week. And those are your 3 takeaways for this week. Before you go, ask yourself, what's my light bulb moment from this? And now that I know what I know, what will I do differently? Choose one action, however small, and commit to it. That's how overwhelmed and reactive becomes aligned and intentional. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of The Lightbulb.